I woke up, as usual, at 5:30 in the morning. I was still in the habit I'd developed during 35 years of military service, even though I'd taken off my colonel's epaulets 12 years ago. My body reminded me of my age with a nagging pain in my knees as I lowered my legs from the bed. 73 is no joke, especially after all those paratrooper jumps and marching. The house greeted me with silence. Marjorie was gone. Gone 3 years ago. Cancer had taken her in 4 months. I brewed myself some strong tea and stepped out onto the veranda, looking around at my possessions. The house I had built with my own hands, a 2-story solid house overlooking Lake Ardencroft. A realtor offered me $940,000 last year. I sent him away. My daily ritual began with a walk around the property. I checked the hedge I'd trimmed yesterday, inspected the garage roof. I'd fixed it last month after the winter snows. The work never ended, but that's what kept me in shape. Wrinkled arms with protruding veins were still strong and my mind was still clear. The kids rarely called. Lorna, the oldest daughter, worked as a lawyer in Portland. I only saw her at Christmas unless she found an excuse to go to the Caribbean with her husband. Fraser, the youngest, inherited my stubbornness, but not my work ethic. I was away too long when he was growing up while he was serving overseas. Marjorie spoiled him, and when I came back for good, it was too late to change anything. The sun was slowly rising over the horizon when I started breakfast. Scrambled eggs and bacon, a slice of rye bread, another cup of tea. None of this modern crap with cereal and soy milk. I ate while looking at the local paper. The town of Ardencroft was slowly becoming a tourist attraction. Old farmhouses were being bought up and converted into guest houses. The local pub now served craft beer instead of normal ale. The world was changing, but not me. The doorbell rang around 11. I wasn't expecting company, and to be honest, I wasn't particularly happy about it. When I opened the door, I saw Fraser, in jeans and a fancy shirt, unshaven as always with those hipster glasses of his. Standing next to him was a woman I hadn't seen before. "Hi, Dad." He never called me father or sir as was the custom in my family. "May I come in?" I stepped back silently, letting them into the house. The woman was slender, with shoulder-length dark hair and an attentive gaze that seemed to assess every detail of my home. "This is Beatrice Morrissey," Fraser introduced her as we settled into the living room. "My fiancée." I raised an eyebrow. The last time we'd seen each other, Christmas 6 months ago, he hadn't mentioned a serious relationship. "Fiancé? Congratulations. When did you meet him?" "We met in January," Beatrice answered in her son's place. Her voice was soft with a faint accent. "At the art gallery. Fraser was consulting on an exhibition. My son called himself a creative consultant. As I understood it, that meant he gave advice to people with money on how to spend it on contemporary art, not what I'd call a real job. 6 months and already married?" I didn't hide my skepticism. "When you know it's your man, why wait?" Fraser took Beatrice's hand. "We're planning the ceremony for a month from now. Nothing big, just close friends and family." Beatrice smiled, but something about her smile made me wary. She reminded me of the intelligence officers I'd worked with in Afghanistan, the same calculating appraisal in her eyes. "You're military, right?" she asked, pointing to a framed photograph of me in full uniform on the mantel. "Retired colonel." I nodded. 35 years of service. "Impressive." She looked around the room. "It's a beautiful house. How long have you lived here?" "I built it when I retired, 12 years ago." "Built it myself," Fraser emphasized with a note of pride I rarely heard from him. "From foundation to roof. Dad had always been self-sufficient." The last word sounded strange, like it wasn't a compliment. "It must be worth a fortune now," Beatrice said, running her fingers along the oak arm of my chair. Real estate in Ardencroft had skyrocketed in value in recent years. I remained silent. I didn't like discussing money, especially with people I barely knew. "We're actually here to invite you to dinner, Dad," Fraser said, changing the subject. "To get to know each other. Beatrice is making an amazing lasagna." "And we wanted to talk about the wedding," she added. "We're going to need your help with some arrangements." "Organizations," I repeated. "You mean the money?" Fraser grimaced. "Not necessarily, although financial support wouldn't hurt. But the most important thing is your presence." I looked at my son, 36 years old and still asking his father for money. Marjorie left him a decent sum when she died. Where did it go? "When is this dinner?" "Tonight, if you're not busy," Beatrice answered quickly. "At our house." Fraser wrote down the address. She handed me a card with a neatly scrawled address in the new Ardencroft neighborhood, where they were building fancy townhouses. Expensive place. "I'll be there at 7. I put the card on the table. "Can I bring you anything?" "Just myself." Beatrice smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "And maybe some photo albums. I'd like to know more about Fraser's family." After they left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching them get into the brand new BMW. My son had never shown any interest in family history. What changed? At 7 p.m., I pulled up to their townhouse. Up close, it looked even more expensive. Modern architecture, large windows, a small but perfectly manicured garden. You couldn't buy that at a creative consultant's job. Either Beatrice had money or Fraser was in debt. Dinner started off well. The lasagna was indeed delicious, the wine expensive. Beatrice asked me about my military career, about home, about Marjorie. I answered with restraint. Years of service had taught me not to reveal too much information. "Fraser told me that you built a house for Marjorie," Beatrice said, pouring coffee. "It's so romantic." "She's always wanted a lake house," I replied. "I promised her one when I retired." I remembered how Marjorie and I had sat on the floorboards of the newly built porch, watching the sunset over the water. "Finally a real home, Wesley," she said then. "After so many years of moving from one military base to another, home was our anchor." "And you kept it after she died," Fraser remarked, "though it's too big for one person." "It's my house," I replied simply. "I built it." "But think about the future, Dad. About inheritance. About practicality." "That's what it is." I put the cup on the table. "What are you getting at, Fraser?" Beatrice put her hand on my son's shoulder as if holding him back. "We're just worried about you, Mr. Torbjorn, living alone in such a big house at your age. What if you fall? Who will help?" "I parachuted over the Hindu Kush mountains before you were born, girl," I said coldly, "and I can still stand up for myself. No one doubts your competence." Her tone turned honeyed. "But Fraser and I thought, after the wedding, maybe it would make sense to pool our resources. The family home should stay in the family. You want to move in with me?" I knew it wasn't true, but I wanted to hear their real plan. "Not exactly." Fraser looked unsure. "We were thinking maybe you'd consider moving to a smaller place, something more suitable, and we could take the house as part of the inheritance just sooner. That's it." I looked at them, a young couple sitting across from an old man. They think I can't see through them. "An inheritance is usually received after a person dies," I said in an even voice. "I don't plan on dying yet." "Dad, don't be so dramatic." Fraser rolled his eyes. "We're talking about practical things. You could buy an apartment in the city, closer to the hospital, the stores." "Hospital?" I grinned. "I'm healthier than you, son." "That's true, Mr. Torbjorn, but no one gets any younger," Beatrice intervened. "And real estate prices in Ardencroft have never been higher. This is an excellent time to sell." I looked at her carefully. It all made sense now. 6 months of dating, the hasty wedding, the sudden interest in my house. They didn't just want the property, they wanted to sell it and take the money. "The house is not for sale." I got up from the table. "It's not for sale. Ever." Dad, you didn't even think— I've thought about it, Fraser. This is the house I built for your mother. It's where I'll spend the rest of my life. What happens to it after I'm gone is my decision, not yours. Beatrice straightened, the mask of benevolence falling from her face. You're not thinking of your son, Mr. Torbjorn. His future. Our future. Your future should be your own. I headed for the door. Thank you for dinner. The wedding invitation is in the mail. Already in the car, I noticed that I had forgotten the photo albums they had asked me to bring. They were still in the back seat. It's for the best. Something told me that Beatrice wasn't interested in family memories, but in the appraisal of the house I'd built with my own hands. Walking back home along the lake, I thought about Marjorie. She always understood people better, saw right through them. Take care of Fraser, Wesley, she pleaded before she died. He's not as strong as you are. Now I knew what she meant. My son was looking for the easy way out, and this woman, Beatrice, saw in him and in me an opportunity to get rich quick. I parked in front of the house and sat in the dark for a while, staring at the silhouette of the building I'd put so much work into. Every beam, every nail remembered the touch of my hands. This was where Marjorie had spent her last years. Her footprints remained here, in the garden she'd planted, in the curtains she'd sewn. This house was all I had left, and I wasn't going to give it away. A week later, in the mailbox, I found an envelope of heavy cream-colored paper, a wedding invitation designed in some Victorian style with curlicues and gold embossing, ceremony in 26 days at Ardencroft Chapel by the lake, banquet at Willow Creek Country Club. A handwritten note at the bottom. Your presence is important to us, Dad. Please call. We need to discuss details. Fraser. I put the invitation on the table and poured myself a whiskey. Honestly, after that dinner I was sure they were going to cross me off the guest list. I guess they were still hoping for something. The phone rang the next morning. I was minding my usual business, fixing a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, and was in no hurry to answer. The calls continued with enviable persistence. Torbjorn, I finally answered. Dad. Fraser's voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. Did you get the invitation? I did. What do you think? I think the chapel by the lake is a good choice. Your mother loved that place. There was a pause. Fraser clearly wasn't expecting to talk about the chapel. Beatrice and I wanted to apologize for the other night, he said finally. We were too pushy. This is an important step for us, and we want you to be part of our happiness. His words sounded clipped, as if Beatrice was standing nearby, prompting him. Accepted, I answered briefly. We need your help with the organization, Dad. You have good taste, and we want everything to be traditional, like it would have been in Mom's day. That's it. A new tactic to appeal to Marjorie's memory. What exactly do you need help with? Everything, Fraser laughed. Beatrice made a list. Can you come over today? Or can we come to your place? I'll be at your place at 4, I answered after a pause. Better on their property. At my house, they were getting back to the subject of real estate too quickly. At 4 o'clock, I parked in front of their townhouse. In the driveway was a black Mercedes with Washington state license plates. Guests? I rang the doorbell and Beatrice opened the door almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting outside. Mr. Torbjorn, she brightened up. How nice to see you. Come in. We have guests already. In the living room, sipping champagne, sat a woman in an expensive business suit. She turned and I recognized my daughter Lorna. Daddy! She got up and came over to give me a hug. She smelled of expensive perfume and the coolness of air-conditioned offices. What a surprise! For me, too. I glanced at Fraser, who pretended to be studying some wedding catalogs. I didn't know you were in town. I flew in this morning, Lorna smiled. A brother's wedding is a good excuse to drop everything for a couple days, isn't it? Besides, I need to meet my future sister-in-law. Beatrice and Lorna exchanged strained smiles, two predators sizing each other up. So what kind of help do you need? I asked, declining the champagne. Lots of stuff. Beatrice opened her laptop. We made a list. First, cars for the guests. Fraser said you had friends in the classic car fleet? There was one, Harry Ashford. Died last year. Oh, she frowned. That's a shame. What about floristry? We need someone to make special bouquets, not those standard roses. The next hour turned into a marathon of questions about suppliers, decorators, caterers. Most of the names I called were either no longer in business or were not the right format. It was becoming obvious that they didn't want my contacts. They needed something else. And then, of course, there's the matter of finances, Beatrice finally said, closing her laptop. A wedding is an expensive affair. Especially at Willow Creek, I pointed out. Why go big if you want a small ceremony for your loved ones? Because it's a big day, Dad, Lorna interjected. A day that will be remembered for a lifetime. Fraser deserves the best. And how much will the best cost you? Beatrice said, a sum that made my eyebrows rise. And you expect me to cover all of it? Not all of it, Fraser answered quickly. Beatrice's parents are contributing their share, but traditionally the father of the bride. I'm not the father of the bride, I interrupted him. I'm the father of the groom. But my father can't afford it, Beatrice said quietly. He's just a teacher. Then maybe we should choose a ceremony we can afford. There was an awkward silence. Lorna shook her head, looking disappointed. Dad, you could be a little generous, she said. After all, you have the means, and this is Fraser's only wedding. I hope so, I looked at my son. Good, I'll pay for half, but on one condition. What's that? Beatrice stepped forward. No more talk of my house. Not now, not after the wedding. Fraser and Beatrice looked at each other. Of course, Dad, the son said at last. It's your house. We respect your decision. Something in his tone made me question his sincerity, but I nodded. A deal is a deal. After that visit, I started receiving regular calls and texts asking for a meeting, cake tasting, choosing musicians, a suit fitting. I gave in where I thought it was reasonable and stood firm on money. Half means half, not a cent more. 2 weeks before the wedding, Fraser asked me to stop by their townhouse to pick up the guest list for the officiant. I arrived at the appointed time, but no one answered the door. Beatrice's car was parked in the driveway, which meant they must have been home. I walked around the house and saw that the door to the backyard was ajar. Apparently, they were in the garden and hadn't heard the bell. I was about to tap on the glass when I heard their voices. Acts like a flint, Beatrice was saying. But when he sees how you look in your wedding dress, he'll be heartbroken. I doubt it, said Fraser. Father has a heart of duty and principle instead of a heart. But don't worry, I talked to Lorna. She's a lawyer, and she's found a solution. What is it? After the wedding, we're filing a petition to have him declared incompetent. Lorna will draw up the papers. We have a neighbor doctor who can do an evaluation. The old man lives alone, sometimes talks to himself. I heard him talking to a picture of my mom. You think the court will agree? With a good lawyer, yes. And once we get custody, we can sell the house or remodel it. Can you imagine the living room if you took out the wall between the kitchen and the dining room? I froze, feeling the blood rush to my face. Incapacitated. Me? Colonel Wesley Torbjorn? I don't know, Fraser. Beatrice's voice sounded concerned. Your father doesn't look like an imbecile. He's very focused. It's a military bearing. But he's 73, B. Dementia wouldn't surprise anyone at that age. And with Lorna on our side, I backed off quietly, so my daughter's in on it too. Both my children conspired to declare me crazy for the sake of the house I built with my own hands for their mother. I got in my car and drove away without waiting for them to find me. I needed time to think. The next day I called Lorna and asked her to come over, alone, without Fraser and Beatrice. She agreed, though I could hear the surprise in her voice. Lorna arrived in the late afternoon as the sun was setting over the lake. I met her on the veranda with a glass of whiskey. "It's beautiful here," she said, looking around. "I'd forgotten the view from this veranda." "Sit down," I pointed to a wicker chair. "Something to drink? A gin and tonic if you have it." I made her a drink and sat down across from her. We were silent, staring at the water. Lorna was always like me. She could wait and be quiet. "I heard an interesting conversation yesterday," I said finally, "between your brother and his fiancée, about declaring me incompetent." Lorna froze before she could bring her glass to her lips. "Dad, and your part in that plan." She set the glass down on the table. "It's not what you think. Is it? What do I think, Lorna? You think we're trying to take your house away from you. Don't you?" She sighed and leaned back in her chair. Fraser had always been impulsive, and this Beatrice, she's the kind of person who sees opportunity everywhere. But believe me, I would never participate in a plan that would hurt you. Calling me crazy isn't harm. It was never a serious plan. She shook her head. Fraser is just daydreaming. You know how he can be. I know, irresponsible and selfish, but I expected more from you, Lorna. She looked away. I just mentioned that there was a theoretical possibility, in conversation. I never thought he'd take it seriously. And now? Now I tell him it's impossible, that any court would reject such a claim, looking at you. I studied her face. My daughter, a successful lawyer, family law specialist. She's always been a good liar. Why is Beatrice so obsessed with this house? I asked. They could buy a better house if she had the money. Lorna hesitated for a moment. I'm not sure she has the money, Dad. Fraser says she comes from a wealthy family, but I checked. Her father is really a teacher at the community college. Doesn't sound like a man who could pay for half a wedding at Willow Creek. Then who's paying? I guess no one. They're counting on you. I sipped my whiskey, feeling the bitterness spreading down my throat. What about you, Lorna? What are you counting on? She was silent for a long time, staring at the sunset. I expect you to live many more years, Daddy, and that someday you'll forgive us for the children we were. What kind of children were you? Ungrateful, she met my gaze. We both were. Mom always said we didn't appreciate what we had. She was right. There was sincerity in her words, but I'd been working with people too long to miss the fake notes. And yet, you're helping Fraser with this. Beatrice. He's my brother, she answered simply. And I'm not sure she's right for him, but he won't listen to me if I say so directly. Why not? Because, she hesitated. There's something about Beatrice that appeals to Fraser, some promise of stability that he's always lacked. Or the promise of money, I noted, from the sale of my house. Lorna didn't argue. Maybe. But I'm here to make sure that everything goes civilized. Civilized, I repeated. As a lawyer or as a daughter? Both. She finished her gin. What are you going to do, Dad? I looked out at the lake where the last rays of the sun were turning the water into molten gold. I'm going to go to the wedding. I'll see what happens next. Lorna stood up. I gotta go. I have a meeting with the wedding planner in the morning. She turned around at the door. Daddy, I know that Fraser and I weren't, perfect kids. But we're your family, the only one you have left. I watched her get into her expensive car and drive away. Family. That word used to mean something. Now it sounded like a threat. The day of the wedding was clear and warm. The end of June in Ardencroft always brought good weather. I was up early, out of habit, though the ceremony was not scheduled until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sleek navy blue suit I had ordered at Fraser's insistence hung on the closet door. Next to it was a small velvet box of cufflinks Marjorie had given me for our 20th anniversary, platinum, with tiny sapphires. I was going to give them to my son before the ceremony. My old military suitcase stood by the door, packed in case I needed a quick retreat. In 35 years of service, I had learned to anticipate complications and prepare for them, especially after an overheard conversation about being declared incompetent. I no longer trusted Fraser or his fiancée, not even Lorna, though she tried to play the peacemaker. At 11, I called Marcus Ellington, my notary and old friend. We served together in the Persian Gulf, and then he studied law and opened a practice in Ardencroft. If I need legal support, Marcus is on my side. "Are you sure they're up to something?" he asked when I'd outlined the situation. "Maybe it's just wedding nerves?" "I heard them with my own ears, Marcus. They're going to declare me crazy so they can take the house away." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What do you want me to do, Wesley?" "Be on standby. I may need to change my will right away, and keep the phone on tonight." "Will do, Colonel." The old military discipline was in his voice. "Good luck at the front." At noon, I arrived at the Lakeview Hotel, where I was to meet Fraser before the ceremony. The desk clerk directed me to the presidential suite. As I knocked, I heard muffled voices, then the door swung open. Fraser looked tense but tried to smile. "Dad, come in." We were just discussing the final details. In the room, besides his son, were his friend and best man Darren, his sister Lorna, and, unexpectedly, Beatrice. Tradition dictated that the bride should not see the groom before the ceremony, but this couple didn't seem to care much about tradition. "Beatrice," I nodded at her, "isn't it bad luck to see the groom on the day of the wedding?" "Fraser and I are not superstitious, Mr. Thorbjorn." She smiled her cold smile. "Besides, we had an important matter to discuss. A family matter." I felt the tension building inside me. "What was it?" Lorna got up from her seat and walked to the window, as if distancing herself from what was happening. Darren looked awkward, clearly regretting being here. "Dad," Fraser began, stepping closer, "Beatrice and I have been thinking a lot about our future, about the family we want to create." "Naturally for newlyweds," I remarked dryly, "and we decided we wanted to start our married life in the right place, in a place with history, with soul." I waited in silence to see where he was going with this, though I already had an idea. "Your house, Dad." Fraser put his hand on my shoulder. "It's perfect for us, for the new Thorbjorn family." "We talked about this, Fraser. The house isn't for sale." "It's not for sale," Beatrice interjected, coming closer, "but it can be given as a gift, a wedding gift from father to son, a tradition that goes back centuries." "What century do you live in?" I wasn't being sarcastic. "Perhaps you'd like a dowry, too." "Don't be like that, Mr. Thorbjorn." Beatrice changed her tactics, her voice softer. "Think of it as an inheritance. You were going to leave the house to Fraser anyway, weren't you? Why not do it now when you can see us building our lives there? See your grandchildren growing up in the house you built?" "Beatrice," Lorna interjected, apparently deciding that the conversation was going too far. "Maybe not now. We have a ceremony in 2 hours." "Right now," Fraser insisted. "I want everything settled before the ceremony. It would be, symbolic." I looked at my son carefully. His eyes glittered with a strange, almost feverish gleam. Something was wrong. "Fraser, are you all right?" "Absolutely." He laughed a little too loudly. "Just a little wedding excitement." I noticed Beatrice cast a warning glance at Darren, who slowly backed toward the door. "Why is this so urgent?" I asked bluntly. "What's going to happen after the wedding that I shouldn't find out?" "Nothing," Beatrice answered too quickly. "It's just that the bank has given us very favorable refinancing terms, but we need to act fast." "Refinancing what?" I shifted my gaze to Fraser. "You're in debt?" Lorna turned away from the window. "Fraser, you promised me that everything was under control." "It is." He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it. "It's just, there's been some financial difficulties. Nothing serious." "How serious?" I insisted. 200,000, he said quietly. "Maybe a little more." I whistled. $200,000? Where did that kind of debt come from? Investments, Beatrice interjected. Temporary difficulties, as soon as the market stabilizes. What investments, Fraser? I kept my eyes on my son. He looked down. Cryptocurrencies. A few startups that worked out. It all fell into place now. The rushed wedding, the insistence on the house, the plans to sell it. It wasn't about building a family nest. It was about debt. And you expect to pay off those debts by selling my house? I felt a cold rage rising inside me. Not by selling it, Beatrice said hastily. Just use it as collateral for a new loan. The house would stay in the family. Until the first default, I shook my head. After that, the bank will take it. The house I built with my own hands for your mother. Fraser exploded. You never thought of your mother until we talked about the house. Your missions, your service, your precious career were always more important to you. And now, you're clinging to this house like it's the only thing that matters, because it is the only thing left of her. I raised my voice too. The only place where she was truly happy. Happy? Fraser grinned bitterly. Was she happy when you were away for months? When she had to raise us alone? When she didn't know if you were coming back from your secret operation? Don't you dare, my voice turned icy. Don't you dare use your mother as a weapon against me. She knew what she was getting into when she married me. And she never, ever blamed me for my choices. Because she was too good for it, he was almost shouting. Too good, and I don't have to be. I'm entitled to a share of what was hers. She left you the money, Fraser. What have you done with it? He turned away, avoiding my gaze. You never cared what I did, he said quietly. My exhibitions, my projects. You always thought they were a waste of time. Because they were a waste of time. I pointed my finger at him. Look at you. 36 years old and you have nothing of your own, only debts and plans to use other people's. Enough! Beatrice stepped between us. This is supposed to be a happy day. Let's just, calm down and discuss this like adults. I am, I said, pulling myself together. My answer is no. The house will not be signed over to anyone. Not today, not after the wedding. And you can forget about your plans to declare me incompetent. It won't work. Beatrice has gone pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I heard you talking about how you're going to put me in a nursing home after you get custody, how you're going to remodel my house, tear down the walls. Fraser looked shocked. You've been spying on us? I came to pick up the guest list like you asked. It's not my fault you were discussing your plans with the door open. Lorna came closer. Dad, it was just a theoretical discussion. No one was going to... Don't lie to me, Lorna, I looked at my daughter. You know better than that. You said yourself that you could prepare the documents. There was a heavy silence. Darren at the door looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. Okay, Fraser said finally, his voice oddly calm. Either you sign the house over to me today or you can forget about the wedding. Fraser, Lorna exclaimed. You can't... I can. He looked me straight in the eye. What do you say, Dad? Your house or my wedding? I slowly pulled a box of cufflinks out of my pocket and placed it on the table. This was supposed to be for you, from your mother and from me, but you don't deserve her legacy. Fraser turned pale. Get out. What? Get out. He pointed at the door. You're no longer invited to my wedding. You are no longer my father. Beatrice put her hand on his shoulder, her eyes glistening with triumph. Fraser, darling, calm down. Maybe your father just needs time to think. No, he shook off her hand. I've made up my mind. Either he signs the house or he leaves. Now. I looked at my son, a grown man who was acting like a spoiled child who hadn't gotten the toy he wanted. What had I done wrong? Where had I gone wrong in raising him? I'm leaving, I said calmly. But I want you to know that I'm not the one who betrayed our family. I turned to Beatrice. He's always been like this. He gets what he wants, and when he doesn't get it, he throws a tantrum. Let's see how long you two can stay together when the money runs out." "How dare you?" She burst into flames. "I love Fraser." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But he wasn't the one you were discussing in that conversation. Not his plans for the future, just the house and the money." I headed for the door, but Lorna intercepted me. "Dad, please. It's your son's wedding, your only son." "I don't have a son anymore," I replied, looking over her shoulder at Fraser. It was his decision. I left the suite and walked through the hotel lobby, feeling the curious stares of the guests and staff. Apparently, our voices could be heard outside the door. Screw it. Let the whole town know that Fraser Torbjorn kicked his own father out of his wedding because of money. Getting in the car, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Marcus's number. "Wesley? Starting to get ready for the speech already?" "Change of plans, Marcus. Meet me in your office, immediately." "What's going on?" "I'll tell you when I see you. And find a good family law attorney. Not local. Portland or Seattle." "Is it serious?" His voice became wary. "More than serious." I started the engine. They'd just made one last mistake. I drove past the chapel by the lake where the ceremony was to begin in an hour. The workers were bustling about, arranging flowers and chairs. I wondered what they would tell the guests. That the old man father went crazy and had to be kicked out, or that I was too sick to attend. It doesn't matter. I've fought my battles for 35 years and never backed down. I'm not backing down now. If they think they can declare Colonel Wesley Torbjorn crazy and take away what he holds dear, they'll soon find out how badly mistaken they are. I parked outside Marcus's office and took a deep breath before getting out of the car. A plan was already forming in my head, clear, detailed, ruthless. Just like the old days, when the lives of my men depended on the right strategy. Marcus Ellington's office was in an old brick building on Ardencroft's main street. Inside, it smelled of leather, paper, and old wood, smells I'd always associated with reliability. Marcus met me at the door, his usually relaxed face tense. "You look like you're going into battle, Wesley," he said, walking me into his office. "I am." I sat down in the chair across from his desk. "I need to change my will. Today." Marcus whistled. "On the day of your son's wedding? What happened?" I told him briefly about the conversation at the hotel, about Fraser's demand that I rewrite the house, about how I'd been kicked out of the ceremony. "God, Wesley." Marcus shook his head. "I'm sorry. I don't need pity." I straightened in my chair. "I need action. I want Fraser out of the will, completely, and I want it done before the wedding ceremony." "Technically, it's possible." Marcus opened his laptop. "We can make a new will right now. But are you sure? It's a big step." "I'm absolutely sure." "What about Lorna?" I've been thinking. Lorna was part of the conspiracy, but at least she tried to mediate. "I'll leave Lorna something. Not a house, but something." Marcus nodded and began typing. "And what do you plan to do with the house?" "That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it before. Who should I leave the house I built for Marjorie to?" "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. "Maybe to some veterans charity. Or—" I stopped talking, thinking of Emmeline, Lorna's daughter, my granddaughter, the only one who was genuinely interested in my war stories, who came over for summer vacations and helped me in the garden. She was 19 now, attending college. Probably Emmeline. She's the only one in this family who has a conscience. "A sensible decision," Marcus continued typing. "Anything else? Any special instructions?" I wondered. What else could I do to protect the legacy I'd created with Marjorie? "Yes, I want to make a stipulation. If Fraser or Beatrice ever try to contest the will or file a petition to have me declared incapacitated, all assets go immediately to the Veterans Support Fund. All of them. No exceptions." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's tough, Wesley." "I'm a tough man," I replied. One more thing. I want to attend this wedding. But you said you got kicked out. That's right. And I'm going back. With you and, preferably, a lawyer. I want to publicly announce that I'm withdrawing my financial support for the wedding. Marcus put his hands down on the keyboard. Wesley, I understand your resentment, but think about it. This is your son's wedding, no matter what he does. Is it worth making such a scene? I looked at my old friend. They were planning to declare me insane, Marcus. Send me to a nursing home. Take away the house I'd built for Marjorie. My son and my daughter. My blood. I shook my head. This isn't just resentment. It's a betrayal. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. I can get Diane Reynolds on the phone. She's a good family law attorney, just in town right now working with another client. Put her on. While Marcus was on the phone, I sat staring out the window at Ardencroft's main street. People walked by. Happy families, couples, tourists. Just an ordinary summer day. For them. Not for me. Did I ever think my own children would do this to me? Were there signs I missed? Maybe I'd spent too much time away from my family, serving the country. Maybe after Marjorie died, I should have been more focused on them instead of the house. No, I was never a perfect father, but I was always honest. I taught them to work, to respect their elders, to keep their word. If they grew up different, that's their choice, not mine. Diane Reynolds arrived 20 minutes later, a trim woman in her late 40s in a strict suit. Marcus quickly brought her up to speed. Mr. Torbjorn, she shook my hand. It's a difficult situation. Are you sure you want an open confrontation? Absolutely, I nodded. They were the first to cross the line. In that case, I should warn you. If your son and his fiancée do plan to file a petition to have you declared incapacitated, our actions today could expedite the process. They may use your appearance at the wedding as evidence of unstable behavior. Let them try, I grinned. I have witnesses to their conversation about the plans for my house, and a recording of our conversation at the hotel. I patted my pocket where I kept my cell phone with the recorder activated. The old military trick. Always record potentially damaging conversations. Diana allowed herself a small smile. Looks like you're better prepared for battle than I thought. I'm good. I'm in. We finished the paperwork close to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The ceremony was supposed to start at 2, so there was probably a reception going on right now. Perfect time to show up. Ready? Marcus asked as we walked out of the office. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, adjusting my tie. We decided to share a my car. On the way to the Willow Creek Country Club, I thought about my strategy. Not to make a scene right away. Wait for the right moment, maybe when the toast started. We arrived at the club around 15:30. There were dozens of cars in the parking lot the guests had already gathered. The security guard at the entrance tried to stop us. I'm sorry, sir, but this is a private event. I'm the groom's father, I said calmly. Colonel Wesley Torbjorn. The guard looked confused. I was told that you, could not attend, sir. As you can see, I could. I straightened to my full height, using my command voice. These are my legal representatives. We have urgent business for the bride and groom. The young guard was clearly not ready for a confrontation with an elderly but imposing retired colonel and 2 lawyers. He stepped back hesitantly. Come in, sir. Inside the club, live music was playing, and guests stood in groups with glasses of champagne. The ceremony was obviously already over. A few people noticed me and froze in surprise. I looked around for Fraser and Beatrice. They were standing in the center of the main hall, the newlyweds accepting congratulations. Fraser in a dark suit, Beatrice in a lush white dress that must have cost a fortune. My fortune, to be exact. Lorna spotted me first. Her eyes widened and she quickly said something to Fraser. He turned around and I saw the color drain from his face. I walked leisurely toward them, Marcus and Diana following at my sides like an escort. The guests parted, creating a corridor. The hall grew quiet. "Dad," Fraser smiled, strained as I approached. "You decided to come after all." "I couldn't miss the big day," I said evenly. "Congratulations on your marriage." Beatrice looked tense, her smile frozen on her face like a mask. "Mr. Torbjorn, we didn't expect—" "Obviously," I nodded. "But I have unfinished business with you and my son." "Dad, please," Lorna intervened, stepping closer. "Not now." "Right now," I turned to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Wesley Torbjorn, and I am the groom's father. Or rather, I was the groom's father until today." A whisper rippled through the room. Fraser stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. "What are you doing?" "What I have to do," I answered without lowering my voice. "My son gave me an ultimatum this morning. Either I sign my house over to him, or I'm out of the wedding. I refused to give up the house I had built with my own hands for his late mother, and I was banished," the guests murmured. One of the older women gasped. "But that's not all," I continued. "Recently, I overheard a conversation between my son and his fiancée. They were planning to file for a declaration of incapacity after the wedding in order to gain control of my estate. My daughter, a lawyer," I pointed to Lorna, who had gone pale, "agreed to help them with the paperwork." "That's a lie!" Fraser shouted. "Dad's sick. He's paranoid." "It's not true," I replied calmly. "I have a recording of your conversation, and witnesses." I pulled out my phone and turned it on. Fraser's voice, slightly distorted but recognizable, filled the suddenly silent room. "After the wedding, we're filing a petition to declare him incompetent. Lorna will prepare the papers. We have a doctor neighbor who can do an evaluation." I turned off the tape and turned to Fraser. His face was contorted with rage and shame. "You had no right to." "I did. This is my life, my home, and I have the right to protect them." Beatrice grabbed Fraser's arm, her eyes shooting lightning bolts. "Why are you making this scene? What do you want?" "Justice," I turned to Marcus. "This is my notary, Mr. Ellington, and my lawyer, Miss Reynolds. I changed my will today. Fraser Torbjorn is no longer my heir. My entire estate, including the house, will be put into a trust managed by trustees with certain beneficiaries, of which Fraser is not one." Lorna stepped forward. "Dad, can't you—" "I can." I looked at my daughter. "And I did. As for tonight's gala," I looked around the room, "I'm withdrawing my financial support. The bill for this celebration will be sent directly to the newlyweds." There was a murmur in the hall. I noticed Beatrice's parents, an older couple in modest clothes, exchanging worried glances. "You can't do that." Fraser looked like he'd been punched. "You promised to pay half." "Just as you promised to be a good son," I said quietly, so only he could hear. "We both broke our promises." Beatrice suddenly cried, loudly with a burst of tears. Perfect makeup smeared down her face. "You ruined our day, our wedding. How could you?" "The same way you planned to ruin my life," I replied flatly. "Justice, Miss Morrissey. Or now, Mrs. Torbjorn." Beatrice's father, a short man with a tired face, approached us. "What's going on? What are the bills?" "We were told that all the expenses were covered." "They were," I nodded, "until this morning. Now it's the responsibility of your daughter and my ex-son." Fraser turned even paler. "You can't do this, Dad. You know I don't have that kind of money. And I don't have a son who plans to declare me crazy for an inheritance." Diane Reynolds has stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Torbjorn, as Colonel Torbjorn's legal representative, I must inform you that any attempt to contest the new will or file for a declaration of incapacity will result in the immediate transfer of all assets to a veterans charity. It's a condition of the will." Lorna, a legal professional, immediately understood the implications. Dad, you can't be serious. I mean, it's, it's my choice. I looked at my daughter. And my right. Suddenly, a young woman, my granddaughter Emmeline, came up to us. Her eyes were red with tears. Grandpa, what's going on? Why are you all fighting? I looked at her, young, innocent, so much like Marjorie when she was young. Family disagreements, dear. Nothing you can't handle. But it's Uncle Fraser's wedding, she looked confused. Can't we put quarrels aside? There was a wisdom in her words that her mother and uncle lacked. For a moment I felt a prick of doubt. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe we shouldn't have made this scene. But then I remembered their conversation about the nursing home, about how they would remodel the house, Fraser's debts that he wanted me to pay off. Sometimes, Emmeline, justice can't be delayed, I said softly, even for the sake of the holiday. I turned to Fraser and Beatrice. I've said everything I wanted to say. Now you know the terms. Good luck with your life together. I hope it will be built on a more honest foundation than the beginning. I nodded to Marcus and Diana, and we headed for the exit. Behind me I could hear the murmur of voices, Beatrice crying, Fraser cursing. But I didn't look back. It was only in the car that I let myself exhale. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exertion and perhaps regret. Are you all right? Marcus asked, sitting next to me. I will be, I answered. Sooner or later. That was impressive, Diana said from the back seat. Not many people would do that. Not many people go through what I went through, I said, starting the engine. In war, you learn not to back down. We drove out of the club's parking lot. I couldn't help but take one last look at the building where I'd just ruined my relationship with my own son, perhaps forever. Had I been too cruel? Maybe. But they left me no choice. They were the first to declare war, the first to cross the line. I was just defending what was dear to me, my freedom, my home, the memory of Marjorie. And yet, somewhere deep inside, where the memories of little Fraser learning to ride a bicycle, of carrying him on my shoulders, of his first tentative steps lived, there was pain. The pain of a father who'd lost his son not on the battlefield, but in a battle for an inheritance. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What's done is done. Colonel Wesley Torbjorn never regretted a decision, even the hardest ones. The week after the wedding passed in a strange silence. No calls from Fraser or Lorna, no threats or attempts at reconciliation. Only once did I notice Beatrice's car driving slowly past my house. She didn't stop. The town of Ardencroft was buzzing with gossip. At the local coffee shop, the chatter died down as I entered, then picked up again as soon as I went to my table. It didn't bother me. In my years of service, I'd gotten used to people talking behind my back. Wednesday morning, while I was having breakfast at the Morning Breeze, the only decent coffee shop in town, a man approached me, a stout, military-looking man about my age. Colonel Torbjorn. He held out his hand. Major Simon Huxley, Marine Corps, retired. I shook his outstretched hand. To what do I owe the honor, Major? May I sit down? He pointed to the chair across from me. I nodded, and Huxley took a seat at the table with a cup of coffee in front of him. Heard about your situation, Colonel. Small town. News travels fast. I'm sure it does. I sipped my coffee. And what did you hear? That your son and his new wife tried to take your house. That you fought them off. That now they plan to sue you. I raised an eyebrow. That last one was news to me. Huxley shrugged. Like I said, rumors. But that's not why I'm here. I represent the local Veterans Association. We meet every week at the library. Nothing fancy. Just conversation, support, sometimes small projects for the community. We'd like to have you among us. I studied his face. There was no pity or condescension in it, just the straightforwardness of a soldier addressing an equal. Why would I do that, Major? Because when the rear betrays the front must stick together, he answered simply. Tonight, 700, west wing of the library, out of uniform, but with orders, if you like. He rose, shook my hand again, and walked away, leaving me pensive. I hadn't attended a veterans meeting since I'd moved to Ardencroft. I preferred the solitude, but now that my family had turned their backs on me, the prospect of spending an evening among men who understood the value of duty and honor seemed appealing. At 7 o'clock in the evening, I was outside the library. In the west wing, about 10 people of various ages were sitting around a long table, ranging from very young guys recently returned from the hot spots to gray-haired Vietnam veterans. Huxley noticed me and stood up. "Colonel Thorbjorn," he addressed the group. "Guys, this is Colonel Wesley Thorbjorn, 35 years of service, Special Operations." I nodded, feeling a little uncomfortable with the attention. It had been a long time since I'd been in a room full of military men. "Have a seat, Colonel," one of the older men said. "Make yourself at home." I took a vacant chair. The next 2 hours passed surprisingly quickly. We talked about everything: politics, the state of the modern army, the problems of adapting to civilian life. No one asked about my family situation directly, but I felt their silent support. "Our main problem," Huxley said as the discussion turned to local issues, "is the lack of affordable housing for veterans in Ardencroft. Prices have skyrocketed, and a lot of guys are living on pensions. Some are having to leave." "What about the subsidized housing program?" I asked. "The city's too small," replied a young guy with a prosthetic right arm. "The big programs don't reach here," I wondered. My house had 6 bedrooms, not counting mine. After Marjorie died, I had closed off most of the house, using only the main rooms. The rest just sat empty. The next day, I called Marcus Ellington. "I need counseling," I said as I explained my idea. "Could I legally convert part of my house into a sort of boarding house for veterans?" "Theoretically, yes," Marcus answered after a pause. "But there are a lot of regulations: fire safety, handicapped accessibility, zoning. It's not an easy decision." "I'm not looking for easy solutions," I replied. "I'm looking for the right ones." The next 2 weeks turned into a marathon of meetings with officials, studying rules and regulations and obtaining permits. City officials were skeptical at first, but when I mentioned that I was willing to fully fund the project with my own money, their enthusiasm increased. Huxley and a few other veterans volunteered to help with the renovations. We started on the top floor, converting 4 bedrooms into comfortable living rooms. I enjoyed the physical labor of tearing down unnecessary partitions, installing new doors, and painting walls. It reminded me of the time I built a house for Marjorie. One day, as Huxley and I were discussing a plan to remodel the back porch for wheelchair access, a familiar car stopped at the gate. Emmeline, my granddaughter, got out of the car and walked uncertainly toward the house. "I'll leave you to it," Huxley said tactfully, noticing my tension. Emmeline came up when he had already left. She looked gaunt, shadows under her eyes. "Hi, Grandpa," she said quietly. "Emmeline," I nodded. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, and we went into the kitchen. I put the kettle on and took out her favorite cookies, the ones I always kept in stock in case she came to visit. "Haven't seen you in a while," I said as we sat down at the table. "How was college?" "Fine." She looked into her cup, avoiding my gaze. "Grandpa, I came to talk about what happened at the wedding." I sighed. "Did your parents send you?" "No." She raised her head, anger glinting in her eyes. "I came on my own. They don't even know I'm here." "I'm sorry." I held up my hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She calmed down a little. "After the wedding, everything went wrong. Uncle Frazier and Beatrice canceled the honeymoon. They had trouble paying the wedding bills. Mom and Dad fought over whether they should help them, and then Mom said you changed your will and now neither of them will get anything." "Not exactly." I sipped my tea. "You're not excluded from the will." Emmeline looked at me in surprise. "Me? But Why? Because you're the only one in this family who's never tried to use me. I shrugged. The only one who came just for fun, not when she needed something. She lowered her eyes. That's not true. I came when I needed something too. When I was sad or when I was fighting with my mom. When I wanted to hear your stories or work in the garden to clear my head. This is different, Emmeline. You came for what I could give you myself. Time, attention, advice. Not for money or possessions. She was silent for a long moment, then looked up. Did they really want to declare you crazy? Yes. But why? Uncle Fraser always said he hated this house, that it was too haunted. I chuckled wryly. It wasn't the house he wanted, it was the money from selling it. Your uncle has some serious debts. Debts? She looked surprised. But he always seemed so, successful. Seeming and being are different things, I leaned back in my chair. A lesson your uncle never learned. Emmeline looked around, noticing the tools and building materials stacked in the corner of the kitchen. What's going on here, Grandpa? Are you renovating the house? Not exactly. I explained my plan to create a boarding house for veterans. The top floor is almost finished. Soon we'll start working on the addition for the common living room. Her face brightened up. That's wonderful. Is there anything I can do to help? I'm on vacation in 2 weeks. I was touched by her enthusiasm. Of course, we could use some help with organizing the garden and with making a list of things we need for the rooms. She smiled, and for a moment I saw Marjorie in her, the same light in her eyes, the same genuine smile. Grandfather, she suddenly became serious. I think you should talk to Mom. She's very worried. Worried about the will, I shook my head. Not about me. Not only that, Emmeline insisted. She's afraid you'll never make up, that you'll be here alone. I'm not alone. I nodded toward the yard where Huxley and 2 other veterans were unloading lumber. I have new allies. Emmeline followed my gaze. Are you happy, Grandpa? That's an interesting question. Was I happy? After the betrayal of my children, after the wedding scandal, after everything that had happened. Busy, I finally answered. And that's more important than happiness. I have a purpose. The house I built for your grandmother will serve those who deserve it, men of honor. Emmeline covered my hand with hers. I'm proud of you, Grandfather. Her words touched me more than I expected. Perhaps all was not lost in this family. That evening, after seeing Emmeline off, I sat on the veranda with Huxley. We discussed plans for the next week and drank whiskey while watching the sunset over the lake. You have a good granddaughter, Huxley said. Not like her father and aunt. Yes, I nodded. She's more Marjorie than my blood. She's been asking me about the boarding house. She wants to help design the rooms. Emmeline's always loved creative projects, I smiled, remembering how she'd helped me paint the gazebo 2 years ago. She has a good eye. We were quiet for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight color the lake golden. You know, Wesley, Huxley finally said, when I got back from my last tour, my wife filed for divorce, said she couldn't live with the ghost anymore. The kids chose her side. I thought my life was over. And what happened? I found a new mission, he shrugged. Started working with veterans, helping guys even worse off than me. And you know what? I found a new family, not blood, but a real one. I knew what he meant. I felt more connected to these people in those few weeks of boarding than I had felt to my own children in years. We spoke the same language, shared the same values. They understood what duty, honor, loyalty meant. Concepts that my children seem to consider obsolete. Have you ever tried to reconcile with your children? I asked Huxley. He stared at the lake for a long moment before answering. I tried. It worked with my daughter, but not with my son. Some wounds don't heal, Wesley, but that doesn't mean you have to stop living. I was thinking about Emmeline, about her asking me to talk to Lorna. Maybe it was worth a try, not for my own sake, but for my granddaughter, who was caught between two fires. Maybe, I said at last. But not now. I have to finish this project first. Huxley nodded understandingly. The next day I met with the architect to discuss the plans for the addition. We decided to create a common living room with panoramic windows overlooking the lake and a small dining room. A place where veterans could gather, talk, and support each other, like our meetings at the library, but in a more comfortable setting. When the architect left, I stood on the lakeside for a long time, looking at the house I'd built for Marjorie. It had always been too big for the two of us, but she insisted on extra bedrooms for the children and grandchildren. She believed that one day the house would be filled with family. Now perhaps it will be filled with another family, not blood family, but bound by shared trials and mutual respect. What would Marjorie say about my decision? Would she approve of turning our family home into a boarding house for veterans? I think so. She's always understood my dedication to service, always supported me, and she would agree that the house should serve those who share our values. What about Fraser and Lorna? Will I ever be able to forgive them? I don't know. Betrayal has left a deep scar, but perhaps time and a new purpose would help me to accept, if not forget, what had happened. 3 months later, we inaugurated Marjorie's boarding house, a project I named in honor of my wife. 4 veterans had already moved into rooms on the top floor, and 2 more were due to arrive the following week. The addition with the common living room was almost finished. Emmeline, as promised, helped with the design of the rooms and garden, coming every weekend during the vacations. On opening day, as Huxley and I cut the symbolic ribbon at the entrance, I noticed a familiar car parked in the distance. Lorna was sitting behind the wheel, watching the ceremony. She didn't get out, didn't approach, just watched. And then she drove away. Maybe that was the first step toward reconciliation. Maybe it wasn't. But I didn't feel any bitterness looking at her, just a quiet confidence that I was on the right path. That evening we gathered in the new living room, me, Huxley, the other veterans, and Emmeline, who had come especially for the opening. We raised our glasses to Marjorie's boarding house and to the new beginning. To Colonel Torbjorn, Huxley said, raising his glass. A man who does not back down even in the most difficult battles. And to new allies, I added, looking around the room full of people who were closer to me than my own children. To a true family. Emmeline squeezed my hand and I saw understanding in her eyes. She knew I hadn't given up, hadn't broken down, hadn't let the bitterness of betrayal define my life. Instead, I had found new purpose, new meaning, and perhaps a new happiness. I was still the same tough, principled Colonel Wesley Torbjorn. But now I wasn't just a lonely old man in too big a house. I was a man with a mission, a man who was doing something important again. Looking out at the lake through the panoramic windows of the new living room, I mentally addressed Marjorie. Look, dear, the house is full of life again, just like you wanted it to be.